words of Reverend Sun Myung Moon from 1991. The ceremony of the declaration of God's eternal blessing. Reverend Sun Myung Moon, July 1, 1991, Seoul, Korea. I just arrived from Alaska. I am making a special visit because this time has great significance from the point of view of the dispensation. The meaning of July 1, 1991. The first day of July this year is not an ordinary first day of July. From the point of view of the history of the dispensation, this is the central year of the 3-year course, which itself is a transitional period in history. The flow of history must now change. The democratic world and the communist world have lost their direction completely, and the religious world has also fully lost its direction. All foundations in which men took pride have been destroyed. This had to take place. When the autumn arrives, the true fruit and false fruit will reveal their true identity. False fruit naturally will enter the fire and burn, and true fruit will be reaped. But from the perspective of the dispensation of restoration or salvation, we are not interested in many fruits. The fruit of realization which religions seek is not many but only one. Although there are many religions such as Buddhism, Confucianism, and so forth, the fruit they pursue is one. Who is the owner of that fruit? It is not some sovereign. It is not some nation. People who rule over nations cannot reap the fruit, and the many religious groups cannot each reap this fruit and claim it as their own. The fruit must represent some particular religious group that represents all religious groups, which reaps the matured fruit to be received as the fruit of God. From this perspective, what would God desire? I will not get involved in a long discussion of the dispensation of salvation being the dispensation of recreation, but if we were to say that it is the work of recreation, then the question is why God needs to reap the recreated fruit. Looking at it centering on heaven, it is not because the other fruit is unworthy, but God is seeking the fruit of the heavenly lineage, for the sake of establishing that blood lineage. In order to establish the blood lineage, we must connect to the tradition that can pass through the karma of love centering on God. The history of the restoration of the eldest son's birthright. Fallen people today have inherited the blood lineage of Satan. This is the problem. How difficult is it to restore the people cleanly back to heaven once they inherited the lineage of Satan? Let me answer this way. Heaven's position is similar to a man who lost his beloved lover and has to love another woman and, further, to love her son, whom someone else fathered, as his own son. The problem is how God can accept that son as his own direct heir. Frankly, it must be miserable and tormenting. Since this acceptance could not be done at once, God began from the individual position and passed through a course of tribulation involving that degree of love on the family, tribal, societal, national, and world levels, persevering and overcoming everything. In this way, he has been waiting until the time he can send the Messiah. How does the Messiah come? He comes after the purification of the blood lineage. As you know, because Cain and Abel were born based on the unity of Adam and Eve, false parents, in order to cleanse their lineage, Cain and Abel must enter the womb of true parents and be reborn in the reversed positions of eldest son and second son. Originally, there would not have been such things as eldest son type and second son type. There cannot be eldest son and second son for the sake of distinguishing them as relatively good and evil. From the viewpoint of the dispensation of restoration, simply establishing the position of the second son as the elder son is not enough to rectify the lineage. The two must seek and enter the source of life once more. This is what happened through Tamar in the Old Testament era. When you look superficially at the Bible, it is difficult to accept the story of Esau and Jacob. Their mother deceived her husband Isaac and her eldest son Esau to let her younger son Jacob seize the blessing. This is unacceptable even by the ethical standards of that time. It is wicked. So the question is, why was this content recorded in the Bible as an important event? It is the same when you look at the life of Mary. A virgin gave birth to a child. What was the situation of heaven which necessitated a virgin bearing a child? Why was it necessary to send the Messiah in that manner? In order to lay that foundation, the connection was made from Esau and Jacob to Tamar, and restoration was to be done centering on the offspring of Hagar and Sarah, and then substantially history was to go forward on the national and world level centering on Mary. That tradition must be recognized and inherited, and the proclamation must be made that a new Messiah will appear. Centering on the period of the world level and the national level, the historical national standard is to be set by tying all these events together and proclaiming the truth behind them. Without this proclamation, the historical standard is not set. What happened to Jesus, who came on that foundation? What would have happened if, when Jesus came, Judaism and the nation of Israel had united as Cain and Abel? How would Jesus have returned? Jesus had to enter in the position of Father. In order to do that on this earth, as a resurrected, substantial being, he had to compensate for all the sacrifices made by the second sons for the sake of reclaiming heaven's birthright given the eldest son. The Abel view of history is that all must be divided into Cain and Abel and then into Esau and Jacob. Even after all of that, on the national level Jesus must gather all the relationships of Abel, and as the Abel-type resurrected substantial being and as the representative of the nation, he must rectify the birthright of the eldest son on the national level again. Without rectifying it, the birthright on the world level cannot be reclaimed. What is to be done after restoring the birthright and claiming the birthright of eldest son on the world level? After restoring the birthright of eldest son on the world level, we can establish the right of parents on the world level. Unless the birthright of the eldest son is reclaimed and the course of conflict on the world level is resolved, parents cannot establish the original lineal relationship. The path of restoration through indemnity cannot be traveled half-heartedly. After they come to the earth, the task of parents is to establish the kingdom. The Messiah, who represents heaven, should have come to this earth centered on the nation of Israel and Judaism, and overcome the Roman Empire. It is not to be overcome through conflict. Everything must be invested in order to bring about recreation. Giving and forgetting, investing and forgetting, and in this way forgetting time and forgetting one's life and environment in order to invest, this single-mindedness is the way that your love will last in the context of God's will. If you assert yourself and promote yourself, what you do will not remain during the course of recreation. For this reason, God cannot have any regard in his mind for people or nations as he deals with the national and world foundation. He must recreate those who become like the descendants of Adam and Eve who did not fall in the Garden of Eden. He has continued to create Adam and Eve, to invest and forget and then invest and forget again repeatedly during the period of individual, family, and tribal restoration. You must understand that God has had that attitude as the foundation for the restoration of a conditional tribe, a conditional people, a conditional nation, and a conditional world. Even in the period of such conditions, it cannot be carried out at our convenience in a humanistic way according to some seemingly reasonable plan. God has not changed during the period of restoration on the individual level, family level, tribal level, society level, national level, and world level. He has maintained the original spirit of love that always invests from the position of emptiness. With regard to the original nature, even with regard to evil or the realm of the devil's powers, the form of the original love has remained unchanged. For this reason, even Satan acknowledges before him, "You are the only owner of the creation." He must make that acknowledgement. How much is Satan changeable? He changes every moment and in every place, south, north, east, and west. He drags the central headquarters to the east, to the west, to the south, and to the north, dragging it everywhere in the environment according to his whims. He brought a lot of confusion in the center. You must understand how miserable this was for heaven, which had to ignore it and persevere through the course of recreation centering on the standard of original nature. Ladies and gentlemen, where can you find an instance in the world when, while having one's beloved spouse stolen, one takes in the children of the snatched wife or husband and takes care of them as one's own? Blessed families especially must be clear about this. Everything is not accomplished just because you receive the blessing. The blessing is conditional. In tune with the dawning of this age, the purpose of which is to inherit the realm of God's heart, we must understand the toils of God, who labored to establish the historical tradition. From this perspective, you must criticize yourselves by the standard of that tradition. I, so and so, have been living centering on myself. You know this better than anyone else. For the sake of the dispensation of restoration on the family level, God has forgotten about his position and prestige in order to carry on the battle. To accomplish the completion of restoration, he ignores his own dignity and takes in the children of the enemy and tries to make them his own children. You must understand that the world can never pay back the debt that is owed to God, who did not hate the enemy but continued such actions throughout history. If your facial features are normal and if you love something about your neat appearance, then you especially must understand that you stand on the foundation of the toil and accomplishments of a God who tried to preserve such appearance as much as possible. The path that you will travel, in the eastern, western, southern, or northern directions, is not something that will be welcomed. It will not be as if you are in a free environment. Devils are opposing us in our path from 100 directions, creating an opposing environment. You must recognize them and overcome them. What are you trying to bring with you? You can only go with the progressive original heart that God created. You cannot do it by a clever method or strategy. The path of the will cannot be traveled half-heartedly. It is a serious matter of life and death. This person who stands here, who founded the Unification Church, has lived his whole life like that. Such a tradition must be left behind, yet what have the blessed families done? They centered on their own families, for the sake of their own wives and children. What are they doing to educate them so that they can be better than others? When I look at the blessed families who are begging me to select their own children for the public path, I am so disheartened. From the viewpoint of the original tradition of heaven, how can this be tolerated? There are some who fall, and after the fall want to be blessed again. How can there be another blessing? The blessing is like dangling one rope down the cliff. It is you who must climb up. You must understand shame. There will come a time when I must cleanse those who receive the blessing.